Okay, great. Today we are going to learn Tanya chapter 5 and 6 in this recording. So they are slightly two different topics, but this is just where we're holding and this is what we're going to do. So chapter 5 is really ending the previous discussion. The previous discussion was we have thought, speech, and action as the most external faculties. We then have intellect and emotion as a more internal faculty. And then we have the essence of who we are. That is known as the Intellect. That is the essence of who we really are, not our conscious selves, not our conscious ones, not our conscious thoughts, speeches, or actions, intellects, emotions, but our very essence, which is beyond grasping, beyond understanding, and by definition, it transcends the transcendental. Okay? This is our essence. Now, we were saying that our garments of thought, speech, and action are primary, and the garments of thought, speech, and action, the reason why they are primary is because just like a garment can take a person, a very lowly person, and make them look like a very lofty person, so too, doesn't matter where our internal faculties are, so to say, but in a way it's more important where our garments are of thought, speech, and action. This is our primary focus. Which is very interesting in and of itself. Should we not focus on the internal? When I say internal, I mean deeper than thoughts. I mean, the reasons why we're doing everything. I think we should, but, what's the Alter Rebbe trying to teach us over here? Okay, but moving on to chapter 5, we're discussing particularly the idea of learning Torah. Now, learning Torah, there's two elements. There's the idea of the mitzvah of saying words of Torah. That's when you read the Torah or your Tehillim, whatever it may be. Saying the words is holy in and of itself. Your mind can be anywhere, hopefully not in a bad place, but the fact that you're saying the words, that holiness permeates the person. However, learning Torah with one's intellect, where your mind grasps the idea and understands the idea, literally the word grasp, apprehension, which means intellectually grasping the concept, that the person becomes one with the concept at the time of grasping. So just like I got this piece of paper, and I'm grasping this piece of paper, I'm one with the piece of paper. However, the Alter Rebbe says there's a difference when it comes to learning Torah. It's interesting how he doesn't say with regards to learning any intellectual exercise, but particularly with regards to learning Torah. Why is it that this only works with Torah and not other intellectual exercises? I don't know. I don't have an answer to that, but it's just something that sticks out for me at this point in time. And that is that the idea is, the novelty of learning Torah is that when a person learns the Torah and grasps the Torah being learnt, it is, as the Alter Rebbe says, a wonderful union like none other. A union from every side and angle exists with the Jew and the learning of the Torah and the Torah itself. So, when I'm holding this piece of paper, yes, you can say I'm one with the paper, but I'm not. There's me, there's the paper's in my hand. I'm not one with the paper. The paper might be encompassed by my hand, but I'm not one with the paper. When you take food coloring and you drop it into water, the water's changed color. But has the water changed color on a deeper molecular level? The answer is no. You have molecules of water and then you have molecules of food coloring next to each other. It's still two separate entities. But when a Yid learns Torah, they become one entity from every side and angle. Every side and angle, the Alter Rebbe says. No exception. And it's a very powerful idea. And another idea is like... And on that idea of it becomes unified from every side and angle, he says that there's nothing else in this physical world, no two entities in this physical world can become one from every side and angle. There's always going to be elements or parts which they are still separated. But when we learn Torah, we become absolutely one from every side and angle. And we know that the Torah is the wisdom of Hashem, so we're becoming bound and connected to Hashem. Also with mitzvahs, but this is a discussion is just on Torah itself. And this is another advantage of Torah over mitzvahs, is that mitzvahs is an encompassing light, which is a very powerful light that encompasses a person and protects a person, so to say. Torah becomes one with the person. It also encompasses, because part of the idea of Torah is it's a mitzvah in and of itself. But learning Torah, the Torah enters the person just like food, and it becomes their flesh and blood. So when a person learns Torah, it doesn't just stay as an external intellectual thing. It becomes one with that person, to the degree that the person is a changed person. There's a lot I can say on this discussion, but I want to keep it rather shorter and briefer. Okay, fine. So let's move on to chapter 6. I think that's a very nice, very simple discussion on chapter 5. Chapter 6, we're starting a new discussion. And for Shkaka for whatever reason, it's been recorded in the same lesson, beyond my intellectual contemplation. So chapter 6 starts off with Zeh Umat Zeh Asa Elokim. The Alter Rebbe says this over and over again, Zeh Umat Zeh. It means this opposite this God made. And the basic idea in Chassidus is that you have whatever God made in holiness, God made an opposite, equal and opposite force in unholiness. So if someone can have a good thought, someone can have a bad thought. Someone can have a good action, someone can have a bad action. Equal and opposite, in quantity and quality. That's how I understand it. And there's very few exceptions. One blatant exception is the essence of a Jew. The essence of a Jew doesn't have an opposite. Doesn't. That's not. It's not that. There is this concept of the essence of the animal soul, the essence of the forces of evil, but it's not. It's not the same. According to what I've learned, it's just not the same. It's not on par by any means, because the essence of the Jew is beyond the framework of the world. And the essence of the animal soul is within the framework of the world. So you can't even compare the two. But be that as it may, every faculty can be holy or unholy. Right? This is the take-home message. Your thought, speech, and action can be holy or unholy. Just because it's popular doesn't mean it's holy. Just because it sounds good doesn't mean it's holy. Very, very interesting concept. And exceptionally practical. The emotion of chesed, of giving, of loving kindness can be holy or unholy. Being too loving kind to a child, is that holy? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not. Also, where is that love coming from? What place? Selfish place or a selfless place? Holy or unholy? As much as I was saying before, chapter 5, that well, in our previous discussion, I was saying this technically then on chapter 4, that the garment is really the primary aspect. Nevertheless, there is the secondary aspect, which in its own right is really significant, is where we're coming from on a deeper level. And that is a large part of this concept that Hashem made this opposite this, that our thoughts, speeches, and actions, our behavior in this world, what we are doing, really all depends to a very large degree on why we are doing it, and that why can make it either holy or unholy. As crazy as that sounds, that why can make it selfish or selfless. That why can make it an animal natural behavior or a godly a directed intention. It could really change it from one side of the spectrum to the other in a very short space of time. So what happens is that when a person is in the realm of that thought or that speech or that action, whatever he's doing in a moment in time, wherever that realm is, whether it's the holy or unholy realm, that's his whole body, his whole consciousness, his whole being is dragged and encompassed by that energy. So if you're doing a selfless action for a stranger on the side of the road, Everything about that person has this holiness permeating him. And if God forbid it's the other way, if he's sitting down, even if he's in a good environment, but he's got bad thoughts in his mind, his whole being is being encompassed by bad thoughts. That's the degree that the garments affect a person. But we're saying particularly that it's not just the garment of intellect, but it's really the rest of your whole being is dragged and brought with the garment of intellect. Really, the Alter Rebbe then goes into a definition. How do you define holy? Kedusha, kodesh. How do you define it? There's different ways of understanding it. Someone who's learned a small to a large amount has probably come across the definition: holy is something separate. Holy is something reserved. Kedushin in a marriage, when the wife becomes reserved for this man only, set aside, set apart from everyone else. So what is holy? Is that holy? And we're not taking away from that definition, but the Alter Rebbe uses different words. And the Alter Rebbe says holy is whatever Hashem, God, is a part of. That is separate. That is set aside from the natural tendencies of the world. That's what the Alter Rebbe comes to say. So it's not contradicting our previous definition of holy means set aside and maybe even a certain degree of loftiness. It's not contradicting it. But the emphasis is that Hashem is involved. That's the emphasis. So whether it's an outright mitzvah, shaking the lulav and esrog, putting on tefillin, putting on a mezuzah, giving tzedakah, whatever it may be, or whether it's running, going for a run, or eating an apple on a Sunday afternoon, what is your intention for that? We'll discuss this more in chapter 7. What is your intention for that? And if your intentions are to be able to connect with Hashem, if your intentions are to live a life, however you want to define it, a Hasidic life, a religious life, but your life is about a relationship, a connection with Hashem, bringing the light of Hashem and His Torah into the world. That's what your whole life is about. Then your mundane actions becomes holy, because God, His presence, comes into everything you do, basically. But that's not what a person is about. They could be doing many mitzvahs, but if they're not even about that, if it's just maybe by rote or by habit, God forbid. But that's what unfortunately can happen sometimes. And then they exercise, or they're eating the apple on a Sunday afternoon, it's for their own self-desire, self-pleasure, whatever it may be. It's not holy. Now, it's important to understand that as much as it is black and white, there is a spectrum. There's different degrees of holy and unholy. And it's important to understand that the Tanya and Chassidus is speaking about very difficult high levels of godliness, angelic levels to reach. But it's not out of the reach of the average Jew, because this book was written for your average Jew. One thing to say, and we'll actually stop in the middle of the chapter, is that the Alter Rebbe, the author of this book, he didn't have these struggles. He wasn't writing this book from his personal perspective. He was writing this book as an outsider, but not a chas v'sholem God, but a naive outsider, or an outsider with a lack of knowledge. Rather, his greatness is, one aspect of his greatness is that he was able to look at the average Jew, not only in his generation, but in future generations as well. You can message me privately how that even works. But the Alter Rebbe was able to look at that average Jew and say, you know what? This is his potential. I see it. I see it in him. Just like a parent sees the potential in the child, the teacher sees the potential in the student. The Alter Rebbe saw the potential in us. And he says we are able to live a life and bring God into every aspect, every fiber of our being, every bone in our body. We are able to do it. And this is one of the key points in the Tanya. And this is the key points of our existence, making a dwelling place for Hashem in this world. Just like a person, his house is filled with pictures and furniture, and everything, accessories, according to who He is deep down. Hashem wants this physical world to be His home, and we are His agents, His messengers, so to say, to come and make it His home, make our body the home for Hashem, by having holy thought, speech, and action. Then making our family, our environment, a place for Hashem, by bringing Hashem into everything, by saying a few words of Torah. Even if people aren't even listening to you, just by saying words of Torah with your mouth, or listening to shirim, recordings while driving or at their shops, making the world a holier place. Zelu Matzeh Esalakim. Everything has the potential. So even if you heard everything I've had to say up until now, and you don't believe me, think of it like this: the one of the reasons why you don't believe me is I'm assuming is because that you might be in a very negatively not the holiest environment, right? Take it with a pinch of salt. That's the proof that you can reach a holy place. Because Zelu Matzeh Salakim, Hashem only made the unholy because He made the holy. And it's paralleled. So the fact that a person can be in an unholy place is proof, based on this very simple principle, that they can reach a very holy place.